Great. So welcome to the Summer Smasher AI edition. I am very pleased to welcome Allie Miller, who came as a speaker through our really great friends at AWS. She will be speaking on AI and entrepreneurship. I'm only meeting Allie now, and I'm really looking forward to her presentation and also trying to get her to come and do more for the garage down the line. So we've hooked you for one, Allie, so get ready for more. I'll let her introduce herself in depth, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Arcelia. And I made this joke in the beginning, but now that the recording has started, you all have such lovely headshots. I feel like I only just now nailed mine. So congrats to all of you for having those wonderful beauty shots. Yes, as Arcelia said, my name is Allie K. Miller. You can find me at Allie K. Miller on pretty much every single social media channel. If you want to take out your phone right now and add me on LinkedIn and Twitter, I would love that. One of the best ways to actually further this Q&A is to just reach out to me on those social media channels. And if you say that you were in this presentation, I'm going to go ahead and respond. Cool. So this is going to be a walkthrough of the engineering to entrepreneurship journey. There will be times where I go really, really deep, and there are times where I keep it shallow because I wanted to play to the spectrum of folks in this crowd. I know you are all adding at the end of your names the projects that you guys are working on. Some people have not yet worked on projects. So I want to speak to the breadth. And so if you have questions on pieces that I didn't get to go as deep on, that is something to throw into the chat. I do have it up on my screen. I'm going to let it try not to distract me, but if something comes up when I'm on a slide, pop it into the questions. I'll see if I can answer it live. I'm not the kind of person that always is extremely formal and saves questions to the end. Feel free and pop it in. All right. Let the presentation begin. So from engineering to entrepreneurship, obviously I first want to introduce myself. So my name is Allie Miller. Obviously I already shared that. And my brain is sort of split into these three groups, whether it's, AI, societal impact, and business. That's really where I've been for the last several years. So I was named by Forbes and AI Summit as AI Innovator of the Year last year. I work at Amazon. I am the US head of ML growth for startups and venture capital for all of AWS. Before that, I was at IBM Watson. I was lead product manager. I touched conversational AI. I ran product development for computer vision for a year and a half, and then rounded out there building multimodal AI with a team of about 30 engineers on multimodal, 50 engineers on computer vision. So I've been really deep in the AI space, always working with engineers. And my experience is that I've seen 300 enterprise ML use cases and over 500 startup ML use cases, really working with these folks, with the people who are in the trenches, with the people who see the problems, and helping them through and sharing those best practices 800 plus times. So I am happy to really speed up your learning curve and make sure that you guys are hitting the ground running and not making the same mistakes that I saw 3 years ago. On the societal impact side, I have helped foreign groups draft their AI strategies. I've worked in the US. I do a lot of work with underrepresented minorities in tech. I'm a national ambassador for the American Association for the Advancement of Science through their If Then initiative, part of a group of women scientists. I got my MBA from Wharton. I am an entrepreneur. I mentor 100 plus people and have a bunch of followers. So this is what I love to do. I love sharing information. I love saving you guys time. I love telling you my mistakes and my horrible shortcomings, and then making sure that the next generation of entrepreneurs or AI builders don't do any of that, or at least do it less. So we are going to sort of structure this thing in three different parts. One is the mindset, how you know if you're ready to be an entrepreneur, what parts of engineering already set you up for success. The idea, how to come up with an idea. And this is like where I absolutely go deep. I have so many ways of generating startup ideas, and I cannot wait to walk you through them. And the last is going to be journey, touching a bit on building the team, touching a bit on productionization. I know some folks are touching machine learning, some folks not so much. So I tried to play it to both sides, but this is pretty much the agenda: mindset, idea, and journey. Join me. Let us do this. All right, so quick show of hands, and because videos are off, I'm just gonna look at the chat. But if you guys could throw in either a 1, 2, or 3. 1 is like, no matter what, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur. It defines me. It boils within, I must. 2 is like, I'm thinking about it. It might be for me. I don't know. And 3 is like, I don't wanna touch it. I'm an engineer. I'm an IC. I don't wanna be an entrepreneur. So 1, 2, or 3, if you guys could throw those in. Okay. I'm not gonna call out names for GDPR purposes, but I'm seeing mostly 1s and 2s, which makes sense, and probably majority 2s. That's great. I hope this presentation illuminates, maybe for the 2s, whether they want to go the 1 route or maybe if they want to delay a little bit, but this is really to get those juices flowing. Thank you. Oh, wow. We got someone writing 1 times a billion. So to that person who just wrote, not going to say your name, but I love how dead set you are. I love the passion. So there's this amazing line that I heard from a famous entrepreneur in Boston about 10 years ago, which is that there's no such thing as like deciding to be an entrepreneur. It's like you're born an entrepreneur and all you're doing is just waiting for an idea. And so I ask the 2s and, mostly think to yourself, like, are you the person who is still deciding if you want to be an entrepreneur? Do you not know how to be an entrepreneur, but you know it's inside of you? It's sort of an interesting club that the entrepreneurs feel like they were born from day one to always build. And I want to share a bit about what is publicly shared about the entrepreneur mindset. I've called out a couple words here that people seem to pull out a lot. There's a lot of risk, uncertainty, failure. There's a phenomenal quote about discovery, which is seeing what everyone else has seen, but thinking what nobody else has thought. A lot of this like newness and creativity. And my favorite is this last, which is like, you have to have incredible confidence to be like, out of the 1,000 startups that exist where only 1 succeeds, that's totally going to be me because I'm amazing and perfect and lovely. But also, I'm going to be the person who sends cold emails, and I'm going to knock on doors, and I'm going to pass out pamphlets, and I'm going to like walk around to colleges passing out my robot. And that balance of extreme confidence and humility is one of my favorite parts of working with successful entrepreneurs. And I'm happy to say that engineers actually have a lot of skills that really transfer into entrepreneurship. And I've worked with hundreds of engineers, and these are the things that I've seen as patterns. Again, they're patterns. It's not a full hard and fast rule. When I think of engineers, they love deep work. They love singing 4-hour blocks with like phone and airplane mode in their bag, no distractions, fully focused on what they're building. They love the act of just building. They love learning new skills. They love new knowledge. They love complexity. I think a lot of people believe that engineers are completely solo. And what I've learned is that they actually love collaboration and pairing. A lot of an engineer's life is around efficiency. And you guys are able to manage not only the big vision, but chunking it into smaller pieces. As you think about code, how are you really building up those pieces? Also, I should have shared, my undergrad was in cognitive science, which includes computer science, and also thinking of problem solving, and not just problem solving through persistence and knowing that you will get it done, but problem solving through creativity. If a path doesn't work, do you continue down that path for 5 more days? Or are you able to track back and go somewhere else? So engineers, you guys are already set up for a decent amount of success, but I do think a lot of engineers think that they're golden because they have that STEM background. And what I want to take you through, which I don't know if other speakers have done this, it's like a mindset reset on a couple patterns that I've noticed out of engineers. These are some top 5 patterns that when people have been able to switch out of this, that is when they become not just an engineer, but a successful entrepreneur who is an engineer. So here are the 5 that I wanted to call out. And before that, just thinking ahead, the top reasons why startups fail, CBI has a wonderful list of the top 20 reasons. I've pulled out the top 9. But only when you get to number 5 do you have anything that has to do with engineering. You have so much more about product market fit, about funding, about putting together a team, business model. And really only when you get to number 5 is it something related to engineering. So that's sort of me setting you guys up to say, you can be the best, you could be the person who wrote 1 times a million, and you could be the best engineer where everyone's like, oh God, she's so good. Like I look up to her so much. And you could be not a successful entrepreneur. And it's these 5 mindsets that I really want to share with you guys. So the first one is it needs to solve a problem people are willing to pay for. This feels like a given in the entrepreneurship space, but really often, especially when I'm talking to engineers, I tend to hear the line, wouldn't it be cool if blah, blah, blah. And I don't want to halt you guys from having that creativity and from thinking beyond and thinking in the 10-year mind frame. But those questions tend to not open up something that someone is willing to pay for. And so keeping that creativity, keeping that thirst for the future, but combining it with the solve. And here are some tactical steps that you can take. And for each of these 5 that I've laid out, I have extremely tactical steps of kind of how to reset that mindset. Some are reading books, some are people to talk to. So the solve for this one is ask how customers solve that problem today. And my favorite way of phrasing this is find the ugh. So if you're talking to someone and you're asking them about their water bottle experience and you say, how do you fill your water bottle? And they're like, I take off the top, I put it under the water machine, it spews out water and I drink it. And, you know, I'm not talking about how filtered the water is or how bubbly it is or whatever. There was no ugh behind it. But if you start talking to businesses or customers and you say, you know, how do you schedule time with friends? And they're like, oh, it's hell. I have 10 friends, we're never free, there are so many different time zones, and suddenly something like Calendly exists. And you want to find that, you want to find that pain, because that means that someone might be willing to pay for it. If someone's just describing it and there's a gap, someone might not be willing to pay for it. When you're finding this don't just ask one person, ask at least 10, and aim for diversity. And diversity of all types. This could be, if you're talking to businesses, maybe you talk to healthcare businesses and banks. If you're talking to customers, maybe you talk to people in Los Angeles, but also people in Boise, right? So when you're thinking of the product that you might be building, really aim for that diversity. 10 is just a very small place to start, but it at least gives you a sense of, is there like repeated ugh? Business issues must be solved now, not later. The successful entrepreneurs I know thought about it from day one. They didn't put it off to their Series A. They didn't put it off till, you know, they were hiring their 6th team member. And, you know, I think about it as, especially if you're building something hardware, right? If you made something that cost $600 to make, and obviously that goes down with scale, but let's say that you made it $600, and let's say that you're looking for 50%, you know, margin over that. That means that you're trying to sell something for $900. What if someone's only willing to spend 50, right? Those are things that you need to sort out in the beginning, because it literally defines how you might build the thing and what features you include. So the solve to this, bring in business minds early, meet a Marshall student, bring them in. You can meet someone on Craigslist. Like, even if it's a temporary person, just to do some gut checks early on. If you're not ready to bring in someone full-time, you need to start thinking about business things early on. Number 3, and I hope that you guys are all laughing, but I hate to tell you all, marketing and sales are real. They're very real. On that list of CBI reasons that startups fail, if you remember, number 5 with 17% was something related to engineering. Just below that was marketing. And so both of those pieces really need to work in tandem. A great product doesn't sell itself. There are, of course, exceptions where you've heard the story where something gets built and it completely takes off. For the most part, that's not the case. Word of mouth is not magic. It relies on, you know, not only salespeople to get it into hands, but marketing folks to really craft that message. What is the value proposition? Why might people actually use this? And it's really important, regardless of B2B or B2C. The solve for this, you know, other than literally just hiring people and continue to scaling out your team, I do think that empathy from the engineer seems to be the missing link in times that I've seen this really work. These are my favorite books to read. These are my favorite theories to read. If you are an engineer, which all of you are with the exception of my coworker, please read Herbert Simon's Theory on Bounded Rationality. That is a great place to start. It is shorter than an entire book. Then read Nudge, then read Contagious. That's sort of my order. And then also, this is kind of fun, but like, analyze your own purchases, right? Why did you buy these noise canceling headphones versus any other brand? Why did you buy your cell phone? Why did you buy that water bottle? And I bet that at some point There was search engine optimization. There was an ad that popped up on Instagram. Marketing and sales were part of you purchasing the very things around you. All right, we are almost done with me telling you that a lot of things are wrong, but another one, perfect is the enemy of done. You know, don't rely on this idea that a better product will always do better. And don't rely on it's about who solves it best. So much of what I see in startups and what I've seen in my work at AWS, where I literally get to work with the world's greatest AI startups, helping all of them grow. I just see that if you wait too long, there is a short window that you can act within. And so don't let perfect be the enemy of done. That means, and I'm going to go back to the which is if you solve something so much better than the someone will pay for it. It doesn't matter if you solve it this much better or this much better. That gap, that first gap, someone's willing to pay for. So to solve here, I'm sure you're getting this a lot in your group right now, but ship and iterate. A way to practice it in your own world, which I literally took on as a New Year's resolution, was give yourself 15 minutes to just get something done, and that's it. Only 15 minutes, and whatever it is at the end of 15 minutes, ship it. And that 15 can be, you know, whatever length you want. I tend to do 25, but like just do it and ship it and release yourself of the burden of perfection. Last one, startups are not a solo effort. I think you probably have heard about solo founders, but at its core, that founder is relying on an entire ecosystem. So you're not on your own. It's not just you with the whole weight of the world and the whole weight of this problem on your shoulders. You can hire a co-founder. We have an entire group at AWS, some of them are actually in this chat, that are dedicated to working with early stage customers and what their problem solving is, their pitch decks and reviewing those, connecting them with VCs and angel firms to literally get their first round of funding. And, you know, when I think of building up that ecosystem and building up that empathy, my book recommendation, which I'm sure many of you have read, is Crucial Conversations. This is just like the #1 empathy building book. There's also NVC, Nonviolent Communication, but Crucial Conversation, #1. Okay, your mindset is prepped. I now get to get into one of my favorite parts, which is how to find an idea. And I'm sure you guys have been keeping a running list of ideas. You guys have probably been inspired through your summer smash, but here are some easy ways to like get really tactical about it and start generating hundreds or thousands of ideas, get those brain juices flowing. So I'm going to take you into a couple deep, and then I'm going to have a big old slide with all of my other ideas. And this is something that I do every day. So I come up with business ideas every day. I switch between frameworks depending on how I'm feeling. This one is not something that you're generally like ideating while you're brushing your teeth. This is the let's solve our own problem approach. And some of the best ideas working on a startup is literally comes out while you're building that startup. And you're building a startup that, you know, sets up calendar invites, but you realize through that there was no internal communication tool, and thus Slack was born, right? Like Slack was literally born out of them fixing their own problems to be able to build something else. And there's a hilarious email thread, if you guys haven't seen that one, about how Slack pivoted and sent to their VCs. So I suggest you guys looking that up. 2 tactical ways to go about this. One is literally join or start a startup and solve the issues that you see coming up. But 2, you know, chat with other startups, chat with other founders, other classmates. What problems have they seen as they went through that process? And I think you'll see that there's a lot of collaboration issues. I think you'll see that there's a lot of engineering cycle management issues that people are still trying to fix today. And there's so much greenfield space there that I think you guys could absolutely jump into. Okay, couple other deep dive ones. This one is the like look beyond our own problems, right? Like you will only have access to a certain set of problems. You live your life, you talk to your friends. And I love this idea of casting a massive net to just see what the world is screaming. And, you know, you don't want to go so far into something that you don't know about, like building, you know, I don't know, skyscrapers in China. But you also don't want to go to something that is only in your world, that problems don't exist for anyone else. So you want to find something in the middle. And this is one of my ideas. But scraping Quora or Twitter for complaints and literally finding tweets that have a negative sentiment, which you can use comprehend from AWS to be able to do that automatically. Search for phrases like, why can't we blankety blank blank blank? Why isn't there blank blank blank? Why can't I blank blank blank? How come there's no blank blank blank? And looking for something with high retweets, high likes. This is literally the world complaining that there's a gap. This is the finding of the ugh in a very scalable, repeatable way. And this is data that you can go to a team that you want to hire, to a VC that you want funding from, and prove and say, like, I know that there's a market because I got it from the market. So that was one other idea. I'm going to just review a couple of these others, other ideas. So starting with a vertical, talking to people who are in that vertical and asking them to complain about their days. You know, that might be talking to a room full of nurses, and maybe that leads you to realize that nurses rescheduling their shifts is really complicated. So maybe you do something there. Carrying a notebook and record problems in your day. This tends to be if you want to build something in the B2C space. I kept a notebook in my back pocket and also in my purse and just wrote out complaints. And I think what I found at least was I'm generally an optimistic person, but because of my product management background, I could find problems. And about 3 weeks into it, every problem became really clear. So it was definitely a pattern that I had to pick up. Taking a global trend and combining it with a repeated action is a video that I've posted on my LinkedIn that I can have Arcelia send you guys that link. Looking at Kaggle, looking at the most cited papers last year. Adam Trier, who is one of my ML idols, he's one of my mentors. He founded Siri, he founded Viv, he founded Sentient, he founded change.org. He is a brilliant entrepreneur. And what he does is he takes tons of ideas, regardless of where they came from. He picks his top 5 and he spends like a year really thinking through, or a couple months working through those 5, and then picks 2 that are really standing out, and it's a major and a minor. And he works on those 2 for a year. And I love that because there's, when you think about risk and risk management, there is this idea of like, oh God, what if I go too deep into this one idea? And if you are having those feelings, Adam's idea and Adam's approach is really a brilliant way of combating that. You can create a competition amongst all your friends and pay people for the best idea. Or last one, which is just if you feel stuck, is doing a random word generator. And let's say that the word is like porcupine and camera. I don't literally mean build a company that is doing computer vision on porcupines, but what you might think is like, okay, porcupines, that makes me think of knives and computer vision, and now I want to come up with a camera mechanism to track what's happening in kitchens. So it's more for ideas that are resting in your latent space and being able to make these distant connections that honestly, a random word generator really works for me. I've seen this work for a lot of other folks. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't, but it's worth like a 5-minute test. So that is a really fun way to build up ideas. I will say that a empowering way of thinking about ideas is to work with others. So you guys I can see how many people are in this chat and this presentation. Thank you so much. Work with each other, bounce ideas off of each other, show them to other people, show them to professors that you had, show them to a Marshall student, and ask, like, how do I think through the TAM, the total addressable market? How do I think about the first step of the MVP for this product? How should I hire a freelance product manager to help me define those things? So, when you're thinking about even just the things on this slide, it's not just you, it's a whole squad, it's a whole ecosystem. Reach out to AWS, we're happy to help. Okay. So now you have an idea of an idea, and now we move into execution phase. And so there's so much involved in execution, but I wanted to give, again, like my middle name is tactical. I don't like those presentations that are like, here's the future of the world. It includes robots. Like, I want to get you guys to that next step. So when we think about execution, these are going to be big topics that each of them could be their own talk. Happy to answer questions, but wanted to take you into some tactical pieces. So 1, your team. When you hire your team, obviously you can go through USC's job boards, you can go through Marshall, you can go through this group, you can go through Hacker News. which is like Y Combinator's board. But what you're looking for is a set of complementary skill sets. If you hire or you pull in your absolute best friend, that is good to a certain degree. You know, you'll get along, you know, you'll be able to build something maybe more quickly because you'll reach consensus faster. But the question you should ask yourself is, will this lead to the best product? Will this lead to the best offering, the best solve for that consumer problem? And it tends to be that people who think in the exact same way don't get there. And that's one of the reasons why VCs actually fund siblings and married couples at a lower rate. So when you're thinking about these skill sets, really try and ask yourself, like, who's going to challenge me and who's going to be complementary to my skill set? A very famous line in entrepreneurship and building up your team is hire slow, fire fast. When you're thinking about who to bring on, this is not like a 2-day decision. It's not that you saw one of their tweets and you really like them, you want to bring them on. This is a slow process. But when you have built up a team, and I know some people are probably deeper into their endeavors, maybe they have a team of 5. If someone is not pulling their weight and it's not really working, I guarantee you it ain't gonna get any better. Okay, so when you're thinking about who is not a fit, who's not pulling their weight, whose vision is not aligned with the rest of the companies, you want to be able to make that decision quickly. And a founder needs to be able to have that decision and to say, you know, thank you so much for your efforts at this point. We're gonna have to let you go. The last piece, which there's like so many journal articles about this, but I did want to include it, is that there's a lot of math around how to split up founder equity. And generally, splitting it 50-50 between 2 founders or splitting it 33-33-33 amongst 3 founders is not the way to go. It will create tons of drama. VCs sort of see it as a red flag. Obviously, there are exceptions, right? None of this is black or white. But in general, you want to look at 60-40. You want to be able to, there's sort of a rule of thumb where after a Series A, the founder would like to hold at least 20% of the company. So that there's a bit in there. Some people will disagree, but that's sort of a nice rule of thumb. And if you start with 33-33-33, then pretty much everyone has gotten diluted. Productionization, you know, you guys know I'm deep in machine learning, I'm deep in AI. I could go into just the productionization of ML for hours, if you will let me. But I wanted to give just a few, again, tactical where to start points. One is we have so many options for training on AWS. And this is my quick link, aws.training is where you can find all of them. I highly suggest starting with storage and database and compute. Those tend to be the 3. If you are building an ML first company, an ML core company, then of course you also want to include machine learning. And the link to that is aws.training/machine learning. Very easy. But these are sort of quick learnings of what are the AWS offerings in that space. There are reference architectures for everything that you could imagine. There are quick start guides. There are cloud formation templates where literally you click a button and the architecture is there, and then you just fill it in with your specific S3 bucket or IAM role. Really easy to get started there. The middle, I know you guys are probably pretty familiar with AWS credits, but I do want to share that, you know, while we give credits through partners, through VCs, accelerators, incubators, universities, we also separately have something called the Founders Tier, which gives $1,000 in AWS credits to any startup, any bootstrap startup. So if you end up spinning off your own, you really want to create it, and you are not tied into to an immediate partner. Obviously, USC is one of our partners, but if this is on your own, there's something called the Founders Tier. Just search AWS Founders Tier, you apply, you get approved. It's great. And the last piece, when people are thinking of productionization, obviously what I just shared about storage and database and compute are the really, really fundamental pieces of engineering and product from the get-go. A lot of this is going to be measure twice, cut once. You know, at my startup, we built up our entire iOS app only to realize that the way that we built it basically made it impossible to transfer that over to an Android. And if only we had thought about how important Android was, we would have built it differently from the beginning. So when you think about planning for the future, not necessarily the skills today, not those core components of training, but when you think about the future, the 2 really big pieces are data and DevOps. And so it's data, it's where you're storing it, How often are you accessing it? Are you thinking about different tiers of frequency of access? And DevOps, what is the life cycle of your data, right? After a consumer or after an end user uses your product, whatever that means, and for Netflix, it could be clicking on a movie. For Calendly, it could be booking a calendar, whatever. What is that end loop? What are you guys looking at? Are you looking at clicks and shares and whatever? Like, what does that loop look like? Because right now, and everyone says like data is king, content is king, but so much of ML strategy is tell me what your data pipeline looks like and how you're refreshing it, how that is your moat, how that is your IP, how you're protecting it, and how you're really being able to build up this whole data and DevOps workflow to prevent others from entering into the space. I threw this up here. I'm not going to go over every single question, the points that are overwhelming, but this is something that you guys can screenshot. Basically, I wanted to lay out the journey of startups, and I'm sure that people have laid this out, but it wasn't quite as clear in a couple presentations that I've seen in my life, so I always like to represent it. But before your Series A, when you are really just toying with this idea, not only is it what product are you building, but the question that VCs are trying to answer as it relates to your business is there product market fit? And a couple of the questions that they're going to ask: is there a market? How big is it? Tell me about your customer experience thus far. You know, I kind of understand where you are today, but tell me about your larger vision. And of course, what's your business model? Because as we know, you have to start thinking about business problems today, not tomorrow. After you raise your Series A and they're like, boom, there's product market fit. Even though they only have 10 customers now, I know that they will have 100 customers. Then it becomes about scaling efficiencies. And for all startups, it's about scaling efficiencies and margin and performance. And specifically for ML startups, it'll be about performance of models, performance of data, new data. But you really want to think about efficiencies in this A to B. You want to increase your margin. And so a lot of the questions that I've thrown in here is about improvement. And then Series B plus, and I know that this might seem far off, but I'll share a quick story at the end, is about new business lines. What new features could you go after, new verticals? It's all about new, and it's how do you grow the pie? Because the assumption is by Series B, maybe a lot of people know you, they're already kind of using you, and we're worried that you'll fully saturate the market, and they want to know like what is next. And so you guys are probably thinking like, what is she talking about? Is like 20 years from now, she's insane. I mentored a startup last year who was literally founded in 2017 and was purchased by Facebook this February. So the entire life cycle of that startup was just under 3 years. And they walked through all of these same questions. They thought through all the same things around team and productionization and data and storage. And I guess I wanted to share that because a lot of the times when I'm talking to university students or people who feel like they're early in the process, the reality is you feel like you're early, but really these things move crazy fast and you want to be able to plan for that future. So that is it. That is my presentation. I meant to give it at lightning speed because I wanted to open it up for questions. That is my favorite part of these presentations. I know I shared the training website, which was aws.training, but the machine learning website, and I would love, like, if you guys could throw into the chat, like, any letter or just throw in ML if you guys are interested in machine learning. I would love to get a sense of what proportions, like type in ML if you guys love ML. Our website for all of our machine learning offerings, awesome, love seeing the ML come through, is ml.aws. And again, my handle on everything is Allie K. Miller. I love continuing these conversations. Add me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. Love, love, love. Thank you so much for having me. And I welcome questions.
Thank you, Allie. So we have some people saying ML. We have a few coming in.
Yeah.
I'll start.
Love seeing the ML.
I'll ask a few generalized questions that, from your experience, I'm sure you're the expert in the room. So for right now, there are so many new things happening in this country. We're dealing with a pandemic. We're dealing with unemployment We're dealing with, heightened amount of mental health issues. And then on top of everything else, we're having all of this social kind of unrest, and people are experiencing extremes in all these different ways. Are you noticing in this very short period, like truncated period of time, any trends in kind of technology, AI, and in the startup space, positive and negative? Like, are there new areas opening up? Like, what are the trends that you're experiencing right now?
Sure. And I love how many things you rolled off, and after each one I'm like, ugh. So I ache with, everyone right now who's working from home. I know that normally things like this, I would have been there in person, and I hope at some point I get to meet all of you. Yes, I would love to share the trends that are happening, and I'll call out a couple quick little reference points. So one, LinkedIn editors reported that hiring at unicorns was down 34%, which is a lot. However, hiring in AI ML is up 10%, beyond what they would have thought would have, like, natural growth. So what that tells me is, when I think AI ML, and this really goes to engineering 101, I think about efficiency. And that's really what ML is. It's finding patterns in repeated human tasks and saying, a human really should be focusing on these other more complex tasks that are better suited for a human to look at. And so where can we really find those efficiencies in repeated moments? And so one of our products, Textract, which is automated document understanding, if you guys are familiar with OCR, optical character recognition, it's the ability to look at a scanned image of letters on, a JPEG or a PDF and be able to pull out what's in there. And that is something that we're really seeing come up with remote work. It is getting used for loan applications during COVID. Literally, Textract alone has approved 500,000 loans for small, medium businesses. So that is absolutely a space that I'm seeing. I think in general, ML right now is only getting more and more looked at. And that's proven with the hiring piece. There is an employment gap within ML, and there's a lack of data scientists. There's a lack of machine learning engineers. And I know some of you are software engineers, and some of you might be, mech eng or other type, civil engineers, but there are so many job postings for people with any sort of ML background. And so if you guys could even just do an ML certification, you will be above and beyond in that recruiting space. And I know this is also kind of trying to balance, like, are you starting your own? Do you want to work somewhere else? But that is, one of the patterns we're seeing is that it's a lot around efficiency. I think, what I love that Jeff Bezos always talks about is you want to build for the patterns that are not changing, and you want to build for the long haul. So yes, right now, people need masks. And maybe that means that you just fully want to immerse yourself in a mask making business. The likelihood that that will be a strong business in 3 years is, like, more risky than if you go after a business that is automating financial payments, because that is something that will continue to be needed. So one of the idea generation ideas, that was the one that's in the video that I'll send to Arcelia, is what is a global macro trend that you can attach yourself to? And that is, like, the rise of mobility, accessibility, remote work, the rise of amazing cameras, the rise of video chat. And, what that might open up is, like, a brand new platform for e-commerce. Like, I'm sure you guys have seen that Facebook Live, Instagram Live, all these are now taking off as e-commerce platforms. So put yourself in the shoes of the global macro trends. Think about things that'll be around for at least 3 years and build it around that. But I can tell you right now, ML is here to stay. It's all about efficiency, and that's only more apparent right now.
Follow-up question. It's like a layup moderator question. Like, can you talk about what's changed in the last 5 years in your industry and how it'll change in the next 5 years? I feel like it's a harder question to answer considering everything we just discussed and how uncertain so many so much of what we have kind of like built our data collection and knowledge on is not necessarily the most valid in this moment. So for instance, just trends with raising capital. You know, VCs and angel investors, early investors are not necessarily behaving the same way that they have in the past 5 years. Do you think it's impossible to project into the next 5 years? Is it something that we should kind of avoid trying to do? Or do you think that predicting the next 5 years is actually something we could do in like the startup entrepreneur world?
So in true engineer ML fashion, there's always going to be a distribution of your ability to predict any one thing. And it is a factor of how much the past will resemble the future, how much data you have, how many edge cases you've seen, how confident you feel that your data sample reflects the larger macro efforts, how siloed your data might be. So if you've only collected data on the US, but you want to look at some global trends. So the answer to your question is, you know, it depends, but those are the specific data points that it depends on. I think more than thinking of short-term VC behaviors, because those are the things, by the way, that you can just see. People are still releasing funding rounds. I still see big funding rounds coming through. Andreessen Horowitz put out an amazing blog on their performance and how they're looking at startups. There are a couple others that have done the same thing. So I will let the VCs speak for the VCs. Obviously, I'm like seeing larger performance, but they are still very much interested in funding. What I see is they're really going back to the things that they know. And when they're talking about like, okay, where can we do the best due diligence, you know, factoring in that it's remote and all these things, they're going back to like, what are we known for? And maybe they're known for biotech or they're known for enterprise SaaS. And that is really what they're anchoring into. But that means that if you're building up a biotech startup, you know to go to Flagship or one of the others. Like it's almost more obvious what to do next. On the topic of just prediction, you know, I feel like I've never once given a talk, and I could be giving a talk literally on the UX of ML, on AGI, on anything. And the question always is like, what is the future of machine learning? So I love, there's this one paper from OpenAI that talks about super predictors and the ability to predict the future, and that the best way to predict the future is to have a bunch of people predict the future and average those. So, you know, my ML predictions has been finely tuned using ML lingo, finely tuned off of hundreds of conversations. But, you know, I think there are a couple obvious trends that are happening within ML that I would love if you guys went into. I kind of break up machine learning into core components. So I think of language, computer vision, and like generally tabular things. Those are three easy spots to start with. In natural language, we're seeing a lot of NLG, natural language generation. You saw GPT-2 and a few weeks ago, GPT-3 come out. So this is really establishing the ability to have NLG, natural language generation, in your apps. And if that word is confusing, it means the ability for the computer or the AI system to write language that has not yet been written. It's not copying and pasting, it's writing something new. In the computer vision space, so much opportunity around performance, around industry specificity, around one-shot training, meaning like instead of needing a million images to train on what this headphones look like, you need one. And you're kind of able to do localization and kind of 3D mapping off of just one image using like shadows. It's really cool if you're looking at some of the newer papers coming out. And then in the sensor space, tabular space, I think we're looking at a lot of new data sources. The government has been coming out with more data sources. There's just more data to be found. You can do like hyperlocal weather instead of just overall, like what is the entire weather for San Francisco? So there are a couple interesting things happening in data, performance, flexibility, customizability, accessibility. That's going to be the pattern for ML for the next 5 years. I tried to answer both of your questions, which is all performance of all startups and the future of all of ML. But yeah, if people want to pop in questions, if any of those terms threw you off, happy to there's no bad question. There's no question.
Yeah, let's encourage. It's a good time to start your video if you'd like and join us visually, but also a good time to ask questions aloud. We've been doing Summer Smasher for a few weeks now, and so our group can be a little shy. Sometimes I like to be rude and call them out, but no, does anyone have any additional questions for Allie?
I mean, hopefully the people who all just wrote ML would have some questions as they're building up their startups.
Hi, Pyleen.
Ooh, you're on mute, but I would love to hear.
Oh, hi. Sorry.
Hi.
Hey, I'm actually a bit of an interloper here. So I'm a professor over at USC Marshall and in entrepreneurship. So thanks for a lot of the stuff that affirmed the things I'm sharing with my students as well in terms of having teams that mix complementary skills and not doing it alone. The question I actually had for you is for, and I think this applies to engineers as well. For those who are not engineers, what do you think they should know, or what kind of advice do you give to them on getting up to speed on how they understand the new technology and trends? And the reason why I think that applies for engineers too is engineers, are focused on a particular area, but there may be other areas of technology that they're not as fluent with. So given that, I really resonate with your idea, you can't boil the ocean, so you can't be an expert in everything, but what are some general tips that you have for, how do you know how far you need to go to understand what's going on to be a sufficiently knowledgeable to be an entrepreneur, to be a leader of a company that might be in a new space or changing space?
Yeah, and I think, you brought up kind of this overarching thing around just curiosity and how much is too much. So a couple things to touch on. One, learning continues after you've founded the company. Like, I know of tons of startups. I worked with startups that went through Y Combinator, and the startup that was extremely deep in computer vision, in tracking people who were lost, in, like children who have run away from their parents kind of thing. They set aside 1 day a week as a team to do research and share back. I know of another startup who went through YC who rotates, and every 2 weeks they have one of their engineers present to the team of something wild and wacky that's completely outside of their core skill set, to say, I read a bunch of these papers, I wanted to summarize to you what I'm hearing in natural language generation because it's interesting. And I put in the middle of the deck, which was like, don't say wouldn't it be cool if, but that creativity still needs to be there, because it'll fire off random things that'll connect and create better products. And this is like one of my favorite movies is Working Girl, where she read a newspaper article and then it connected to this other thing that she read, and she ended up making a huge private equity deal out of it. But you want to have these disparate connections. To your question around like how much is too much, I just time box it. Like, rather than say how much of computer vision should I learn, it's like you can only do so much. Eventually you have to build. So the way that I structure my day, usually every day I'm reading like at least 10 articles, but that should be heavier on my side than on an entrepreneur side. So reading at least a couple articles, form a group. So if you, like, one of the questions around here was in healthcare, form a group of people interested in healthcare, share articles between that group. I would just time box and say, like, for 4 hours every week, you should be reading really deep about new tech or that industry you want to go after. And then that way you're not hitting yourself for not doing enough, and you're carving out that time block time, so you're still allowing yourself to build. I don't think there's ever an answer to be like, oh, I've learned all that I can learn, because I still see things in the startup space. Like, a company will come to me and I'm like, what are you building? So I time box it for my own sanity, and I combine it with vertical and horizontal things. But I also, I love masterclass. Like, get creative with it. Don't, I love 2-minute papers on YouTube. That's like highly recommended. If you're eating dinner with someone and the conversation gets boring, just watch 2-minute papers. I love just these quick little hacks. But yeah, anything that I've done that has accelerated my curiosity and growth has always been in a group. So I have a group of like women in AI, and we all share top articles. It just accelerates my learning. Form a group.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for doing all your teaching and everything. That's
Yeah, thank you for joining us too. What a great question.
Yeah, thanks.
Mina, or do you have the guts to get on camera and ask your question out loud? I challenge you. There she is.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like as an industrial engineer, because we don't go into sort of the more technical of like computer science and stuff, like how could I get involved with machine learning?
So the good news is that there are lots of aspects of machine learning that connect to industrial engineering. And really what you're looking for is step one, literally just like, what are the ML use cases in the industrial engineering space? So do you want, I know you just put yourself on mute, but if you want to unmute yourself and share like one example of an item or like an industrial engineering workflow, like what might be a product that you're looking at? Like how it's been
like simulation tracker, because I know for industrial engineering there's a lot of simulations on sort of like supply chain or something like that.
Totally. So even just the words that you just said, right? And I'll play them back to you. Supply chain or supply chain optimization. You had said like, I'll even throw in like resource allocation, which is a similar thing around supply chain. And you had one more that I thought was brilliant. What was it? It was a
simulation tracker.
Yeah, sims. Okay, so like log sim tracking. So those three brilliant ML use cases, even if you just spent 1 hour and carved out one of those. So let's say it's supply chain, and you just searched and set a Google alert. Like one of my life hacks is Google alerts. Set up a Google alert for quote supply chain, quote industrial engineering, quote machine learning, and have those come to you once a week. Read all the headlines and pick like 3 articles to deep dive into. And you will, in the course of 4 weeks, be more knowledgeable on ML as from the viewpoint of an industrial engineer than 95% of your entire industry. Like so many people rely on the ML person to do the ML things. I'm telling you, like ML will completely bleed into every little place. And the way that you will build your systems will be with ML in mind, and you will make fewer mistakes than the other people. So those use cases, brilliant for ML. There's so much around synthetic data generation, around simulation tracking, because literally simulation is fake data. It's like what has not happened but could happen. So synthetic data would also be another one that I would throw your way. But yeah, I give this exact same advice to non-engineers who just come from an industrial background. Google Alerts, life hack, and pulling out some of those top ML use cases. And then if those interest you and psych you up, then we have like so many use cases on AWS. If you searched, log simulation AWS, you can literally read like the technical requirements and the workflow and reference architecture that went into it. And it'll just, you'll realize that because you already understand the use case, the architecture totally makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah. Congrats to you. Cool job. Cool.
Great question, Mina. There was one more question. You kind of touched upon it briefly. I think it's Farshid, who's not a Summer Smasher participant, but I'm wondering if I can get them to come in and kind of expand on their question for ML and healthcare. Hey, Farshid.
Hi, thanks for this great talk, really informative. I'm an assistant professor at Keck School of Medicine. I'm mainly doing neuroimaging, and we do a lot of artificial intelligence for diagnostic purposes. But for commercialization, we notice it's pretty hard to get into the market because there are FDA approval challenges, and then it creates a big barrier for entry. So I was wondering if you had any experiences in the past for getting healthcare into commercialization, and if you have any suggestion for that. And thanks again.
Yeah, of course. And I'm going to ask a follow-up because this is the punishment that you get. Are you trying to launch a startup, or is this you educating the 20 people who are in your class of how to launch that startup?
I'm trying to launch the startup. Yeah, we
Got it.
already have like the registered the startup, but we are kind of trying to get into the market.
Got it. So I'm happy to say that there is an Allie Miller for healthcare at AWS, and we have an entire healthcare team that works with startups all over the world and how they're building up. And not only are they dealing with the technology side, and I would step in and help with the neural imaging side and think about the diagnostic side and ML, but when it comes to HIPAA, when it comes to GDPR, when it comes to FDA, that team has so much knowledge around getting healthcare through. So many things come with that. I mean, when you think of credibility partners, so if we're doing co-marketing, that is a signal to the audience and to VCs that, you know, you have that established rapport with AWS. I'll throw in, you know, there's so many other partners like VCs that specialize in healthcare is a wonderful resource. If you are really going up against compliance, and my previous startup was in the healthcare space, and we were going through the FDA clearance and whether we were getting level 1 or level 2, and just going with an investor who knew that unlocked a lot for us so that we didn't have to do it on our own. There are some like third party, you know, will help you get through this. They generally tend to charge a bunch. I think if they're not like funding you in some way, it starts to get a little difficult. So I would just start with a more nuclear view, which is AWS, VCs, or like a healthcare startup meetup group, which might be in a med school, it might be cross med school. I know of a bunch of these. I went to Wharton for my MBA, and the Penn Med, Penn Nursing, and Penn Engineering had a ton of work together around getting healthcare clearance.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Great
Good
question.
luck. I hope that goes to market.
I love all of these additional participants. This makes me very happy. A lot of faculty, a lot of USC faculty from different departments. Super happy. One more question before we just thank you profusely for spending time with us. It came in from Yi Chun. She's a Summer Smasher participant from StyleBot. Yi Chun, do you want to turn your camera on and ask in person? There she is.
Hi,
Cool.
I'm
Great
Yi.
background.
Thank you for sharing. I have a question. It's that I'm a student and I hope to find a job about machine learning. But when I apply the job, like the recruiter don't think I have a great experience or project that perfect fit the job. So I'm wondering how can I gain this such kinds of experience, and how can I do related projects to like a perfect match for this kind of job. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I absolutely love your background. So I love your Zoom background. Is your student background, are you in computer science? Are you computer science with a focus on machine learning? What have you studied?
My major is analytics. So I have learned a lot about machine learning, about data science. Yeah, about data, yeah.
Okay. So you pitched it to me as, I go after the recruiter and they say I don't have enough, so how can I get more?
Yeah.
But I'm actually going to expand the options and share other things that might be going on. And so I first want you to check on these before you go after more experience, even though more experience is great. One is, does your resume scream machine learning? Is it in like the first couple lines? Do you talk about the machine learning courses that you took, the data science courses that you took? If you keep talking about analytics, there's this hilarious fight between analytics and machine learning where people will think, okay, you're in analytics, you're not actually in machine learning. So it needs to scream machine learning. It needs to include the courses you took. It needs to include the languages you know. So if you know Python, R, like absolutely include that. If you've played around with ML tools, AWS, Amazon SageMaker being one of them, what have you played with? What algorithms are you familiar with? Is it XGBoost, sequence to sequence, linear learner, random forest? Like, what is your experience in the ML space? My guess is that your resume right now screams analytics and doesn't scream machine learning, and the recruiter is being annoying and doing that. Because if you have analytics and you've done a bunch of machine learning, and you just came out of one of the best schools in the entire world, you should be set up for success, right? If on top of that, you are wanting to get more experience, offering yourself up as a freelancer, working with other students to try and get a side project. I have another post, and I'll share this one with Arcelia as well, where it's like 10 ways to get more experience in ML, and it starts from the easiest and goes up to the hardest. You can join Kaggle competitions if you want to be able to like prove and say, here's a portfolio, building up your GitHub repo to show literal projects that you've worked on. But I have this sneaking suspicion that you are amazing in machine learning and that you'd be able to contribute. And just there's something weird with the resume and what you're showing on like public sources in GitHub that's just not quite connecting to that. But if you would like to get more experience, I'm happy to share that link as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
That's great. That's great practical advice. Allie has made herself available for all of this time, and I wanted to thank you once again. I look forward to getting some of those resources and any additional resources down the line. I think the students would be very happy to have them. And then also, if you guys are interested in connecting directly to Allie, I know that you mentioned, what was it, through LinkedIn? What was the
LinkedIn is my number one, but like Twitter and Instagram, I'm probably more responsive on. So.
And so all of those are still technically live on the events page, but I have that information and I'll share that along with the other things that you give me. It's been really great. What a great topic. I mean, you covered just everything. I didn't know that was even possible. Your entire deck was from like beginning to end, how to be.
Now you guys go start
a startup now.
Yeah. I loved speaking to you all. I know I only got to see some of your faces, but based on the chat and based on how fast you guys were all firing off those 1s, 2s, and 3s, I know that the excitement's there. I know the passion's there. I know quarantine is probably getting to you, but don't let that lose your entrepreneurship steam. That is, take this time and really just go nuts with it, because you want to be able to look back and say, man, I smashed that summer smash, and I'm so glad that I have all these things coming out of it.
Great. And we'll send you an invite for our showcase at the end of the program on July 31st, and see if you have time to just pop in and see what this
Yeah, sounds great.
accomplished. All right. Bye, everyone. See you guys on Wednesday. Bye.